Well, hello, my friends. My name is Thad Riley, and we made it to episode number 300 of the Thadcast. To all of my new listeners out there, thank you for joining me in this amazing month of November. I'm going into the weekend here in New Hampshire with almost 70 degrees. I think tomorrow's supposed to actually be 70 degrees. The other day I got in the car, and it was 23 degrees when I was driving to go teach spin. And if you're watching me on YouTube right now, you can see I got the sleeveless shirt on, so I'm getting ready to go. Hopefully I'll get these episodes caught up and uploaded today. If I don't and you go to the YouTube channel, I promise to get caught up soon. I promise. It's not like the vote counters all over the world right now who are like Nevada, who is all weird and they count like votes for like 2 minutes. YouTube only lets me get so many uploads a day. So hopefully this might actually be the day I finally get caught up. Anywho. Today I want to talk to you about one of my favorite stories in the Bible, and it's one of my favorite stories because of how it's impacted my life, and I hope it impacts your life today in a similar fashion as to how it's impacted mine, because I think this story is so relevant for our culture today. There's this scene that goes down, and it's a little bit after the horrific moment in the garden where Jesus is taken away by a mob with clubs and swords and fire. They've got these torches, and they've come in and they've taken Jesus away, and they've marched him off to this trial. And this trial is the worst of all kinds of trials. First of all, it's being held at night. And if you know anything about that time in history, in the Jewish custom, they didn't hold trials at night. We don't hold trials at night either in our world today, or in America today at night, right? But this is late at night, and they had certain people in the room, and they had this trial, and they put Jesus on trial. And while they're there, they make all kinds of accusations against him. Horrible stuff's being said, especially blaspheming God, which of course he is God, right? So he's good. And his only response to them is a statement of who he is. But most of the time it was silence. There was no response. And he stood there in peace within himself, maybe not because of he was being spit on, and he knew the horrific pain that was about to come after his body, and what it would be like to bear the sins of all mankind on his shoulders on the cross as he died. And that horrific moment where life has expelled from the body of Jesus, and he cries out to heaven as it does, and all of this. And we come back and we find out, and looking at this whole story, is those words, my Father, forgive them, for they know not what they've done. And Jesus walked into this moment of intensity with this surety, with this knowledge of who he was and who his heavenly Father is. Do we think about that in the moments where we're anxious, where we're nervous, where we're feeling despair or dread or anger or frustration or whatever negative, toxic emotion may have a hold on us in a certain moment? Maybe we feel ganged up on. Maybe we feel oppressed. Yet all of a sudden, in a moment, we can look to God, our heavenly creator, our loving creator, who knew us before we were born. And the goodness of God lives in each of us who follow Jesus each and every day. And in these moments where we feel oppressed or attacked or anxious or have despair, in all of these moments, what is the truth? The truth is that God is with you, and he sits on the throne. And we think we sit on the throne of our lives, and I go back to a guy like Steve Jobs, a multi-billionaire. I don't even know how many billions the guy had when he passed away. The guy got cancer, and I think he died like a couple years later. I mean, he died young. What was he, 59 years old? I don't know if he reached 60 or not. And this guy had every asset available to him in the world, and he died of cancer. And this is what happens. Life is short. You see these people who have their whole lives, their careers in front of them, and in a whisper, they're gone. And it's over. And we've spent all of our time worrying about this moment or this thing that has no bearing on eternity. And we've dedicated so much of our mental emotion, like our mental and emotional power that we have in us, and it's gone because we let it be captured by something that shouldn't have captured it. And Jesus stands resolute in peace because he knows that God has a plan. Now that plan may include your suffering. And that plan may include some really hard moments. I don't know what the plan includes for you. I don't know. I have no clue what it includes for me. So how would I have any clue about your plan? Right? Nobody knows. Nobody knows what's going to happen tomorrow, but God does. And Jesus knew that God's plans were good, that God loves us. And maybe it's hard to see in that moment, but he does. He cares. And we have a world of history to prove us such things. When I was going through the end of my first marriage and the turbulence and turmoil around some of the actions of my ex, I remember thinking, God, how could any of this be good? But the lessons I learned and how I've been able to come alongside people and help them and give them hope and encouragement because of the devastation my children and I underwent, I'm telling you today that I am living proof of God's goodness in this world. There's this other guy in the Bible. This other guy, like Jesus, is some guy in the Bible, right? Let's get it together, right? I think he's a little more than some guy in the Bible. But there's this guy in the Bible, and his name is Paul. And he used to be called Saul. And he had a thorn in the flesh. And no one has really ever known really what that thorn is, but I've had some ideas myself of what it might be. Do you want to know? I think Paul had a great anxiety. There were a couple times where Paul was supposed to speak and he talked about his fear, this grave despair in his heart before he spoke. And he didn't want to die at different times when his life was threatened or when he was in jail. And there was a great despair that came out of him. And so I wondered if it was an anxiety that Paul had or some type of depression. And I remember this guy, he lived his life with so much hate towards us, towards followers of Jesus. But what happened? God spoke to him and changed his life in the blink of an eye. And we see this happen all the time. God changes the person or changes the situation in a blink of an eye. And this is what Jesus knew. Jesus knew he was going to have to suffer and die, but he knew what God's plan was. He knew God's plan. But even if Jesus hadn't known every detail, would he have still followed the plan that God put in front of him? And I think about all of these stories that we have in our world today of people who are oppressed and anxious and struggling and depressed, and they're in despair and they feel confused. And this election can bring people down because they had so much hope put in an old, rich, white guy. Right? And I get it's about policies and so much more. I get it's about so much more. Believe me, I get that. But this is why we are able to stand in the flames of this culture today, is because of the example that Jesus set for us when he stood before the Pharisees in that final moment before he was taken off and beaten, or actually goes before Pilate first and all that stuff, right? But in those final moments, maybe what would be worse for you would be having a bunch of people standing around and accusing you falsely of things. And that's what they were doing to Jesus. And he stood strong. He stood strong because he trusted in God with all his heart and didn't lean on his own understanding. That's from Lamentations. I started to say Lamentations too quick. I think it's 3:22 and 23. It's a good verse. My encouragement to you today is to be a little bit like Jesus. To stand in the midst of things. And you can be like Paul too, and you can know about your thorns in the flesh and what you struggle with. But you're going to shout to the heavens and cry out to God to give you some hope, to give you some strength in the moment. To not get thrown around by toxic, disturbed people. But to be okay with who you are and who Jesus is. To be at peace. To have a peace in your heart because of God and his goodness for you and his love for you. And the example is Jesus. Isn't he always the example of what it looks like to stand with grace and dignity and peace and even love in the middle of the fire? Life isn't easy. It's a lot harder than I thought it was 20 years ago. But it's a lot better too. It's a lot better because of all that God is doing in our world today. We just need to open our eyes to it and look for it and glorify his name and capture it for his glory when we see it. God is with you today, my friends. Put your hope, your trust in him. Whatever challenges you may face today, know that God is with you. And as Romans 8:31 says, God is for you. And to follow him and trust him. And he will do good. Because that's who he is. He is a good God. And I hope this episode helps you to go forward in peace today, my friends. In the peace of knowing who he is. And I also hope that you would share this with somebody today. It might help them from where they're at right now. That would be a good thing. If you have a moment to go onto iTunes and fill out a review, that's always helpful for me too. Well, listen, I'm going to get out of here, go teach a spin class. I hope you have a great day today. This was episode 300, if you can believe it. Thank you so much for taking time out of your day to join me, my dear friends. And until next time, may you be blessed.